Dr. Raymond Normand, which I have to say, I am a huge fan of yours and all your accomplishments and everything that you've done. And every time we've had a chance to speak, your energy just exudes positivity. And I just love being around you and having deep conversations. So I'm honored to have you here as a guest. If you don't mind, start out by telling everybody a little bit about yourself, what you do, and a little bit about your journey.
Sure. I'm a licensed psychologist here in California, in Los Angeles in particular, and I specialize in helping people who are struggling with anxiety, depression, relationship issues, and also addictions. I also like to write a little bit on the side, which I know you're familiar with,
Yeah,
Omid.
yeah.
And my big message is basically helping people work on psychological and emotional issues that they're struggling with to really afford them an opportunity to be able to live healthy and happy lives.
Absolutely. What drew you to this profession? What made you decide to get into psychology?
So I knew growing up that I'm really good at reading people, and I realized fairly quickly that I'm a good listener. So when
Mhm.
people are talking, I have an ability to really hear what people are saying, even past the words that they might be using, the words that they're using.
Absolutely.
So I realized people get relief from that. And it's like, hey, why not help people doing this and make money doing that? So it's a win-win situation.
Sounds great. So today our topic is about childhood development. And the burning question that I have, as I've always had, is how important is childhood in the framework of the rest of our lives? Like how early is early stage development and how we are treated by our parents and how does that affect our future?
I think our childhood affects our adulthood very much. Um, Part of what I do is I help people really understand how what they went through as children shapes how they become as adults, which is something that a lot of people I understand are not necessarily aware of. People are not usually thinking about how did I get here? They're not thinking about, well, where did this pattern of relating or feeling stem from? So to really have that opportunity to talk about and to really understand that, it affects us a lot.
Yeah.
Think about your relationships with your mom and dad. As children, we don't have much power, we don't have much freedom. We learn whatever is taught to us, and we don't necessarily have the platform or the ability to challenge or protest what is happening to us when we're little. Now we can try to protest those things, but I think what ends up happening is that, you know, at the end of the day, we have to do whatever our parents are telling us is the right thing to do.
Yeah. What are some common mistakes that you see or some examples you can give us that parents make or that you have seen in your
Um,
experience?
So I want to first preface what I'm going to say as I don't think parents are trying to hurt their kids. I
Absolutely.
think parents are well-meaning and they're just doing the best that they can. So really, I have to frame it in terms of it's their limitations. Parents' limitations can really hurt kids. And so I think what you're talking about is their limitations, which we sometimes brand as mistakes. One of the things is not hearing the kids, like not really listening to what they're saying. Um, Another one can be, which is related to that, is not allowing kids to feel their emotions.
Right.
I think a lot of times it happens where when parents, again, they mean well, but a lot of it can come back to them where they can't tolerate seeing their kid feeling uncomfortable. And so what they'll try to do is they'll try to distract the kid. They'll try to tell them to knock it off or to criticize what they're feeling, which is essentially teaching the kid that they're not okay to feel the way that they feel.
Right. And what happens later in life as a result of these limitations imposed by parents?
Well, from the ones that I discussed, I think what ends up happening is that there's the possibility that the kid starts to question themselves and doubt themselves, and they don't develop the confidence to listen to their own gut. They start looking outside to see how they should feel on the inside.
Right.
So, whereas confidence really comes from understanding who you are, understanding that your choices and your thoughts and beliefs are valuable, it turns into, well, I don't matter that much. So let me see what they want me to think or what they want me to feel. And I'm going to try to do that as much as I can in order to feel valued or valuable.
And what can we do later in life to reverse the effects of these limitations?
I think number one is recognizing that it's happened. For example, when people come to therapy or counseling, or if they can do like thoughtful introspection on their own, to start to realize that there's been a pattern where they have perhaps been criticized, put down, possibly even neglected whenever they had something very meaningful to say, and recognizing that that hurts. Recognizing that, wow, I felt really anxious or I felt really sad, angry, out of control when my mom or dad said that to me. Because as kids, we don't think to ourselves that, oh, my parents are doing the best that they can. That's
Yeah,
not something kids do.
right.
Kids are just a big ball of emotion. All they know is you either make me feel safe or you don't make me feel safe. So if disagreeing with me, putting me down, neglecting me makes me feel unsafe, then chances are I'm carrying that with me throughout my lifespan unless I actively stop, protest it, and replace it with an alternative course of action.
Very cool. So I feel better now. Tell me about this book that you've released and why write a book and what message are you trying to put out there?
So I noticed that in doing a lot of work with people, a lot of the problems invariably trace back to childhood and the way they were treated by their parents. So the purpose of the book is really to help the parents and the kids alike, but a little bit more the parents to kind of teach them how to handle situations where their child might be feeling sad, upset, or anxious. The goal is to help parents understand that it is completely okay and actually recommended that they listen to what their kid is saying and to notice it. And if you can, try to show them that you understand that they're feeling hurt and give them that space so that they can open up and talk about what it is that's actually bothering them.
Great. And from personal experience and people that I've talked to through the years, there's a stigma against therapy. They feel like they don't need therapy. Can you touch on this stigma and how people can overcome this
So I
philosophy that it's oh, it's not, therapy's not for me?
Well, the stigma, there's not much we can do about it other than recognize that the people who have created the stigma, maybe they themselves have difficulties that they don't want to look at. So it's much easier to brand it as therapy is for crazy people than to be like,
Yeah,
oh, well, maybe it applies to me or maybe it can help me. In terms of what we can do about it, in my experience, people usually don't come to me until it hurts them more not to come to me.
got it.
You know
Well,
that,
but
you know,
how do you know if you need a therapist? Like, how does one get to that point?
I think if you're feeling unhappy or you feel like you're suffering or you feel like you're anxious for a prolonged period of time and you can't stand it anymore, that's probably a sign that you might benefit from going to a therapist, like
And
opening up.
how do you find the right therapist for you? Because you might not be a match for everybody out there, but how do you
Correct.
find, what is the process in finding the right match for a therapist?
I think sometimes you can ask people who already go to a therapist that you might be aware of for their recommendations. Another
Mhm.
way is you can Google it online. There are therapist directories and websites that people can look at. And in addition to that, I think it's important that once somebody identifies, let's say a few people, call them, just interview them, tell
And
them
talk
what's
to them.
going on, talk to them, and kind of see how you feel talking to them because interpersonal chemistry is very important. Like when people call me, I tell them like, look, it's basically it's up to you. You don't. My attitude is you don't have to come to me. I can't tell you where you should spend your money.
Right,
That's a decision you have to make. What I can do is I can give you a glimpse of what you would be getting if you were to see me.
right. So it's a basically a matter of comfort level if you feel comfortable speaking to that therapist and feel open. But on the other hand, it's the therapist's job to make you feel comfortable.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, that is the idea. but people go at it from so many different angles.
Right.
Like, so people can have, you can have five therapists. They can be very different, but they
Yeah.
can all be effective for different people.
And in addition to therapy, what other recommendations do you have for patients that might be battling anxiety or depression or just don't feel right?
Well, what they can do is they can write about it if they're interested, like just journaling. That's something that I promote, and I actually do it myself as well. It can be very liberating to start doing stream of consciousness writing and just seeing what it is that's going on in your mind. And
Yeah.
if you have the ability to stop and like analyze, like, hey, I'm probably going through this issue, then I think a lot of that can be helpful in alleviating people's feelings of anxiety and distress.
Is there a difference between a handwritten journal and an online typing journal? Do you see any difference in that?
Not, it's really up to the person. The
Okay.
people have asked me that question. I personally, I like to write by hand. It just feels more authentic.
Right.
But if somebody says, you know what, typing it out is more comfortable for me, I would say power to you.
And is there a time of day where you recommend writing, early morning, late night, or whenever?
Just whenever you feel like it.
Absolutely. So, last few years, COVID has been a hot topic. How do you feel that COVID has affected our children, their development, and what are the effects that have you seen, like a global pandemic like this, alter our lives and the trajectory of childhood development?
I think what COVID did, especially the lockdown is what I'm referring to. The
Right.
lockdown and the restrictions, I think, made people go stir crazy.
Hmm.
It confined them where their distractions were diminished. So now like stuff is getting real. And so maybe certain feelings that they had that they were trying to suppress or that they were trying to distract themselves from, now it was coming out more clearly and prominently. And so I think what ended up happening is that, I mean, I felt it. I mean, I got super busy.
Right.
Um, and I could see why people were so distressed from that. In terms of the kids, it's a double-edged sword. On one hand, I can say that, it subjected them to increased distress also because maybe seeing their parents be that way or they didn't get to be with their peers and stuff, that created some discomfort. On the other hand, it can be viewed as sort of a blessing for the kids because now they're spending more times with their parents that they may not have spent if their parents are constantly at work. If you ask me, I wish it didn't happen,
Of course.
but
Yeah.
because it did happen, I like to consider also that there is a positive to it in that it brought some people closer together that may not have otherwise gotten close together like that.
Absolutely. So, Life Pro is a manual for a better life. Like that's what our objective here is with this podcast. So, if you had one word of advice for people listening about how they can achieve a better life, what would that advice be?
Be yourself.
Okay. And what do you mean by be yourself?
We live in a world, there's a lot of pressure to conform and to be what people want you to be, in all levels of institution in society. And I think what ends up happening is that people get stuck playing the game and they forget that they're playing a game.
Yeah.
They forget their individuality, they forget their talents, they forget how good they are.
Yeah.
And that's what I really promote for people to start listening to themselves more and to taking action that align more with their core authentic selves.
Absolutely. And outside of your own book, what is one book that you think everybody should read?
Wow, you give me all the hard questions.
Sorry, put you on the spot. Is
uh
there a book that had a distinct effect on your life?
yeah. Uh So one book I really recommend is called A Failure of Nerve by Edwin Friedman. This was a book that really shaped me in a powerful way, and it really speaks to the benefits and also the challenges of what it means to be a more authentic person. Because again, we can say that being authentic is easy. I think sometimes the media portrays it as being easy, but the reality is that it's not always easy because we live in a social circle, we live in a social structure and community where people are used to us being a certain way. when we start to change the way we are, it can start to create ripple effects where people no longer feel that they have the same kind of comfort that they did with us previously. They might get anxious, they might get worried, which are all very fundamentally human emotions. But I think at the end of the day, being able to be yourself, being able to be okay looking in the mirror, feeling comfortable in your skin is something that you can't really put a price on.
Absolutely. Um, I thank you very much for your time. So for our listeners that want to get in touch with you, how can they get in touch with you?
They can go to my website. It's www.westlaspsychologist.com. My phone number and my email are on that.
Fantastic. And I really appreciate your time. I had a lot of fun doing this. I always enjoy spending time with you. And I ask for my listeners if they enjoy this podcast and they want to share the wealth and share the wealth of knowledge and have a better life, please do share. And if you want to reach us, lifepro.coach is our website. Dr. Raymond Norman, I thank you so much for your time. I wish you all the best.
Thank you, Omid. You too.